I enjoy Linux. I think it's a great OS. Okay, but it's got some problems, and one of it is called shared libraries. A lot of people will disagree with me on this. It's all a matter of opinion. There are projects such as PCBSD and Gobo Linux that try to create installer packages, like EXEs in Windows and DMGs in Mac. But, as it stands right now, if you really want access to the wide variety of applications that are available for Linux or BSD, you're basically going to have to use the shared library model, which means using ports or packages or packaging managers, etc. It's completely different. It's a completely different philosophy than the way EXEs and DMGs work, and it's probably one reason why people are uncomfortable with Linux and BSD. When you have an OS like Windows that has something like 90% of the market share, people are naturally going to be looking for alternatives that offer the same ease of use and learning curve. Now, Linux does seem promising, and it is promising, but you're going to have to understand that the shared libraries model of installing packages from a package manager and managing dependencies that way is a different philosophy and actually represents a completely different way of doing things. Is a non-shared libraries method better? Arguably, it is, yes. This turns the OS into something more like a shopping cart, where you can go to the different websites, different software vendors, free of charge or otherwise, and simply click through a wizard and have your software up and running. Not so with the shared library model. Now, this is obviously a limitation in some ways, but a benefit in others. It saves disk space, bandwidth, so on, so on. Simple fact of the matter is, Linux and BSD, as they stand today, with some exceptions, represent a completely different way of getting software onto your system, as well as keeping that software up to date. Personally, I think it would be nice just to be able to install software. Go to the vendor's website, download the file, go through the wizard or whatever, and have it work. One standardized software installation binary across all Linux distros. But it isn't going to probably ever happen. Just realize that. Deal with it. And you have potentially a very nice, secure, robust, modern operating system. But one must also realize that this is what it is, and act accordingly. If you approach it as a different philosophy of getting software on your operating system, from the get-go, things will go a lot smoother and things will make a lot more sense, and perhaps one would be less likely to get caught up in the shopping for software, treating the OS like a shopping cart sorts. Instead, thinking of software programs installed as a type of configuration of the OS. This means you pretty much have to know what software you want. As discovering, trying out, and installing new software or upgrading to the latest version of existing software apps when months have passed since the initial install can sometimes mess up the operating system. Taking out other working apps with it, not always, it depends. It can be a pain, but once you figure out how it works, it makes sense why things happen. Disable the check for updates functionality in OpenOffice, Firefox, etc. You won't and can't really use it, at least not in the way you think. Forget about trying out betas and so on, at least downloading them from vendor sites. This will ultimately eventually lead to nothing but frustration. It's a simple misunderstanding of the philosophy. Make a list of the software you want. Install it in one fell swoop when you install the operating system. Upgrade or reinstall often. Use 2 computers or 2 hard drives and learn how to clone and mirror those things. Get involved with it. Stay alert, because if you're not constantly learning something, you're really probably not paying enough attention. It can be fun and rewarding if you have the time and inclination to do it. If you're not that tech savvy, plan on reinstalling every few months or so. If you're more tech savvy, plan on upgrading every few months or so. Reinstalls work better if you ask me. Upgrades can be touch and go, although they do represent a learning experience, and that can be a good thing if you like learning computers. One thing you could do is keep your home directly. One thing you could do is keep your home directory on a separate disk or something, then just update or reinstall the OS on a separate disk or partition. Look, we all live in a world where there really aren't that many Windows-like alternatives to Windows, and so I think that often this makes us look at things a little bit skewed, perhaps innocently hopeful, but in an unnecessarily frustrating way. If you're going to use Linux or BSD and don't like the shared libraries thing, try PCBSD or Gobo Linux. But still, until those catch on, you may not really find the file types, .pbi files for PCBSD for instance, from your favorite software vendors. It's a different philosophy when it comes to installing software, but you can make it work so long as you're realistic about it. Alert when you're dealing with it and willing to learn, and you have the time. Otherwise, being realistic about the situation, the amount of time you're willing to devote to it, and the amount of frustration you're willing to deal with can be completely helpful. Seeing how much money you're saving, though not having to pay for an OS, setting up two computers, it might not be so far to reach, actually, Linux and BSD is really a choice, and when we're desperate in a Windows-centric world, our decisions aren't as informed as they could be. One might also say that the word of mouth marketing is also not quite as informed or realistic. Linux is easy to install, so basically install often. Use the money you saved to buy another computer and some spare disk space. Keep your data and files backed up on a separate disk or something. As I see it, shared libraries are really the only choice right now. You're just going to have to deal with it if you go this route. For me, that means update or reinstall every couple of months, with the attendant cloning or swapping out of hard drives between two different machines, etc. Once you get good at it, it doesn't take nearly as much time as you think. Still, it does take time. So one just has to be realistic about it. Until your favorite software vendor offers .pbi files for something like PCBSD or similar packages for Gobo Linux, or some other standardized format comes out, we're all stuck with the shared library model. And we just need to be realistic about what that means.